We'll get started. So unfortunately, Rabbi Jenny couldn't be here tonight. I know she was super stoked, so I promised that I would send her the recording. Um, so I'm going to read her intro. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for Tu B'Shvat and Modern Eco-Kosher, Ethical Eating for Today's World. Hopefully everyone has been having a lovely Tu B'Shvat, and tonight we're going to be hearing from Lisa Apfelberg and Sara Eifler of Jewish Veg about Eco-Kashrut and mindful eating as a way to respond to the environmental, social, and ethical issues facing our world today. I also just wanted to say a quick thank you to Sybil and Anya for your sponsorship, support, and work in this arena. I'm going to read a quick bio for each of our speakers and then turn it over to them. Lisa Apfelberg is the executive director of Jewish Veg, a lifelong defender of animals, the environment, and disenfranchised groups. She became vegetarian at age 6 and has been vegan for almost 20 years. Lisa is currently a student in the Executive Master's Program at the Spertus Institute. Prior to working professionally in the vegan world, she always made herself available to teach her friends how to cook delicious food without using animal ingredients and hosted vegan cooking classes for her birthday parties. Lisa lives in Austin with her family and has recently moved to a tiny house on an organic farm where she is learning to grow produce and working on perfecting her cooking and baking skills. And Sara Eifler is the director of programming of Jewish Veg, a national nonprofit that, as an expression of Jewish values, builds community to encourage plant-based lifestyles through support, education, and celebration. She holds a BA from Brandeis University and is a current rabbinic student at Aleph, the Alliance for Jewish Renewal. Sara believes in a Jewish ethic of responsibility and care towards animals and the earth, and is passionate about global food justice. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa.
Thank you so much, Anna. Happy Tu B'Shvat, everyone. We're really excited to be here. I think we actually planned on this event like 8 or 9 months ago with Rabbi Jenny. So this is maybe the furthest out we've ever been booked, but we're very excited to be here. I also really want to thank Sybil for connecting us. And Anya, I just heard about you, but thank you for your support as well. And I'm gonna turn it over to Sara to get us started. And then she's gonna do the first half of our presentation, and I'm gonna take it from there, and we're looking forward to teaching you and then having a conversation with you. So Sara, turning it over to you.
All right, thank you, Lisa. First, I just want to announce to everyone that Lisa has gotten her master's and is now in a doctorate program. So everyone should know how amazing Lisa is how we should start this program. So hello, thank you all so much for being here with us. Happy Tu B'Shvat, Chag Sameach. As probably most of us are aware, but maybe not all of us, Tu B'Shvat is a holiday in which we celebrate trees and connectedly the environment and how we live in the world as a Jewish people with an ethic of responsibility and care and stewardship for the earth. So what we're going to do tonight, I'm going to start us off with a little bit of a grounding in some of these Jewish concepts, kind of get us into a sense of why this is such a big, important Jewish issue. And then Lisa's going to take over and talk to us about how that applies to the modern world that we live in today through this concept of eco-kashrut. And I'll do a little framing of that first. So any questions before I get started? Cool. If at any point I'm talking too fast or I give a concept or word that I don't define well, or you're just like, what is going on? Please feel free to interrupt and let me know. Otherwise, if you can hold all questions till the end, we will make time for a question and answer period. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. And we're all going to give it a minute to load. Okay, here we go. Okay, title slide, nothing interesting happening here. Okay, we went a little fast. Okay, so we're starting with this concept of eco-kosher. And in order to do that, we've got to look at what actually kosher is. We use the word kosher a lot, both in the context of Judaism, Jewish tradition, halakha, Jewish law, in kind of its original sense, as well as in a secular sense. We use the word kosher. Is this, I don't know, is this play kosher, for instance? And what's interesting about that is that actually both usages of the word work, in that the word kosher means literally something like fit. Like, is this fit or proper for us to eat or see or talk about or joke about? And so the concept of eco-kashrut really takes that core idea of what this word means and expands on it. But when we talk about kosher in a Jewish context, we're usually talking about food. And so we're going to look at that first and look at what the kosher laws are. I'm not going to go into all of the kosher laws. We do not have the time for that. What I am going to do is give a basic overview of the kind of categories of what the kosher laws are. And I'm going to start by talking about one of the big ones. Some animals are permitted to be eaten while others are forbidden. So we know that we cannot eat pigs. We know that we cannot eat seafood like shrimp and crustaceans. But we can eat, according to the kosher laws, cows and other animals that chew their cud. Okay, big law number one, we can eat some animals, not others. However, even for animals that are permitted, there are specific parts of their bodies that may not be eaten. So we can eat some parts of some animals. But consuming blood is explicitly forbidden. So of the permitted body parts, of the permitted animals, you have to drain all of the flesh of blood and thoroughly cook it before it can be eaten. So certain parts of certain animals cooked in certain ways. And another big one, animals must be killed in a specific way. This is known as shechita, or kosher slaughter. And this is meant to be and was designed to be as humane and painless as possible. So certain parts of certain animals cooked in certain ways, killed in certain ways. And then we have meat and dairy must always be separated. There are different laws about this. These are examples that I have here, like waiting the 6 hours between consuming meat and dairy. That differs from community to community, but the basic law of separating meat and dairy is kind of an overall law. And insects are forbidden. So this is where you might see some restrictions around fruits and vegetables. Nothing wrong with the fruits and vegetables themselves. We just got to make sure there aren't any bugs in them, which like good for us. So what do you notice about all of these laws? And feel free to unmute and shout out an answer if you would like to. What do they all have in common? If no one wants to answer, I will answer the question for you. Sybil, go ahead.
They're restrictive.
They're restrictive. So that's not the one I'm leading you towards.
Sarah, in the chat, I don't think you can see it right now,
Oh,
but
it's in the chat.
Anna said, Anne said animals.
Yeah, so Anne has the answer I was going for. However, Sybil's answer I want to just spend a moment on. Yes, they're restrictive. They are restrictions. They are literally about putting barriers around the foods that we eat. And that concept is really interesting because it can feel like an overstep. It can feel grating. It can feel like, why are there these outside laws telling me how to eat and live my life? But what's interesting about it is what we're going to get into next. So first, yes, the kosher laws are restrictions on eating animals. There is an understanding in our tradition in which God, Hashem, makes all of the world and all of the creatures of the world, that killing and eating animals is not ideal. We have that understanding in Judaism. That is part of what it is for us to live out a Jewish life, is to understand the value of life and the lives of all living creatures, including non-human animals. Eating animals is allowed, but there are those restrictions because it makes us think. Kashrut is a system of mindful eating. This is the main point that I really want to make here, kind of in this section on Jewish thought. The purpose of kashrut, the purpose of restriction, is to make you take a second and pause and reflect on what you're eating, how you're eating it, how it came to you, why you're eating it, and what that food is doing both for you personally and in the world. So that's where this concept of eco-kashrut really hones in on what I consider to be the central purpose of having a system of dietary laws. It's about thinking about it, about taking that moment to reflect on how you live in the world. So this guy, Reb Zalman, Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi, he is actually the founder of my rabbinic school. And he, in the 1970s, coined the term eco-kosher. So there's his name if you want to Google him, he's pretty cool. He decided that what we needed was to take this core concept of kashrut, this idea of thinking really carefully about what and how we eat, and look at where the world that we live in now. For him, the 1970s, very different world than when these laws were first established. We have a modern agricultural system that is beyond what the rabbis and the prophets and our biblical ancestors could possibly have imagined. So how do we take that idea and look at it in our world today? And so he wanted to look at what is fit or kosher to use, to drive, to buy, and of course to eat. How do we bring this into our modern world? And what we come back to, and I'm getting to the end of this section here, so I want to kind of hone in on two main points. It's really one main point, but I'm going to use two different things to prove it. We're focusing on this concept of stewardship and care, right? That it's our responsibility to think about these things, to think about the world that we're living in, and to apply the way that we live in the world, Jewishly and in our full lives. How do we do that in a way that is true to and honoring this concept of stewardship and care? There's a midrash, which is a rabbinic story, that goes like this. When the Blessed Holy One created the first human, he took him and led him round all the trees of the Garden of Eden, and said to him, "Look at my works, how beautiful and praiseworthy they are. And all that I have created, it was for you that I created it. Pay attention that you do not corrupt and destroy my world. If you corrupt it, there is no one to repair it after you." We are responsible for the world. That is what our ancestral wisdom teaches us. And specifically, you'll note how we're talking about trees here. It's Tu B'Shvat. It's a perfect time to be talking about trees, and in particular, about trees and food. There is a law, a Jewish biblical law, called Bal Tashchit, which means do not destroy. You may or may not be familiar with it. It's often used as a kind of general environmental law, which is great and important. And where it comes from in Torah is from Deuteronomy, the last book of the Torah. And it's from this section, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I do want to read the bold parts. We are talking about being at war. We're talking about extreme violence and circumstances. And in the middle of talking about war, the Torah tells us you must not destroy the trees. Even when you're at war with a city, you must not destroy the trees. The Torah says only trees that you know do not yield food may be destroyed. Because we always have to be thinking about the future, about the environment, about the earth, about how we are building a world to live in. And is that world one in which there will be food? That matters for our ancestors and especially for us today. And on Tu B'Shvat, again, it's the perfect time to pause and reflect on how we are and are not living out these values today. And so to talk more about that, I'm going to pass now to Lisa.
Thanks, Sarah. So many of us have heard about how our food choices impact our health or our climate and environment, but don't understand exactly how and don't make the connection to our Jewish values. There's so much information to convey on this topic, and I won't be able to cover everything, but I'm going to share a little bit about the basics of factory farming and then share what this is doing to our planet. And towards the end of the presentation, we will talk about solutions and ways to address this. We have to teach about these issues if we're going to be committed to working to change things. I ask you to keep in mind that our religion is flexible and adaptive. We've had to be in order to survive all that we have. We teach about this topic in the hopes that what we learn about these issues and how we respond to them, that we can do so in creative and new ways. We did not understand how destructive animal agriculture was 50 years ago, but now that we do, how are we going to respond? Judaism teaches us that there's an opportunity every day to lead the way to making the world a better place. Next slide, please. On this slide, I'm going to tell you about the numbers involved in factory farming. And Sarah, if you can get the other parts popped up. Thank you. The animal ag industry is incredibly destructive, which makes it hard for us to honor our modern day eco-kosher goals or follow our mandate to not destroy our planet in a number of ways. The main issue is that the astounding number of animals that are slaughtered each year. In the US alone, 10 billion land animals are killed for food every year. And sadly, this doesn't take into account that we kill an additional 47 billion aquatic animals per year. And it's also important to note here that these numbers don't actually paint the full picture because millions more are killed by the egg and dairy industry, and they aren't in this count because they aren't eaten. It is also important to note that 99% of meat, dairy, and eggs comes from the factory farming industry. So while many people believe that they are buying items that are different because they're labeled with words like humane, these labels are not regulated, and the vast majority, up to 99%, come from factory farms. I'm going to now share a bit about what issues are caused by the massive amounts of animals killed for food. And we do this because we hope that by bringing awareness to Jewish congregations, we can help them to adopt some new food policies and practices. So what are the issues with these astoundingly high numbers? Next slide, please. The first one is land. One of the many issues with this amount of land needed to feed those 10 billion animals that are then killed for food has turned the American Midwest, which was formerly forest, prairie, and marsh, into corn and soy as far as the eyes can see. This food isn't going to feed people, it's going to feed the animals. The big problem is that meat production requires much more food than it creates. The study on this slide found that if the food currently grown for animals was used to feed people, we could feed an additional 4 billion people. So when we worry about overpopulation, it's not that we have an issue with how many people there are in the world, it's that we are not using our resources or land correctly to be able to feed them. Next slide, please. In the summer of 2019, many of us watched in horror as the Amazon rainforest was on fire. The fires were caused by farmers who were cutting down the forest to grow corn and soy to feed cattle. This is an issue for multiple reasons, and I'll share 2 of them here. Deforestation destroys important habitats, which cause precious animals to go extinct, which is such a sad and horrible loss for us. Secondly, forests act as a carbon sink, which means that the trees in the forest help clean our air and pull the carbon dioxide, which is causing our planet to warm, out of the air. When the forests are destroyed, we've lost these 2 valuable benefits, often permanently. Next slide, please. In the climate change and environmentalism community, there is a lot of focus on cars and driving when it comes to pointing the finger about global warming. However, there are many reports that conclude that eating meat is much worse because in addition to producing carbon dioxide like cars do, the meat industry is largely responsible for producing methane. Animals such as cows and sheep produce methane when they digest food, and this makes animal agriculture the biggest source of methane emissions in the United States. Methane does not live as long in the Earth's atmosphere as carbon dioxide, but it has 86 times more warming potential in the short term. As you can see from the quote from Joseph Poor, creating food this way is incredibly inefficient. Next slide, please. As you can see from the image on this slide, to create the pie chart, the animal-based foods has an incredibly high water footprint because so much water needs to go into every step of the process. In this slide, you can see that meat takes up more than 50% of the agricultural water footprint based on data from the EU. This image does not show beans, but I wanted to share about them because beans are considered a superfood that are packed with protein, and producing equivalent amounts of protein from beans requires just a fraction of the resources needed to make beef. One study found that compared with beef, beans require just 1/20th of land usage per unit of protein consumed. And when it comes to water, kidney beans require just 1/10 of the water needed to produce beef. Even better, ditching the meat altogether in favor of plant-based foods reduces an individual's food-related water footprint by nearly 60%. Animal agriculture also affects our water supplies in other ways. Fertilizers, pesticides, and excess nutrients from animal manure pollute water, and they enter runoff and leach into rivers, streams, and other surface water. It is my understanding that your synagogue is focused on issues around social justice and social action, so I wanted to share a bit about the impact of animal agriculture on humans too. The Jewish community's commitment to helping others is something that we are proud of and strive to do every day. Many people believe that the waste from the animals is used as fertilizer, but due to the astoundingly high numbers of animals involved, the industry has way too much waste. What happens is that the waste sits in large lagoons, like the one pictured here, that often overflow. They poison the air and water nearby. As you can probably guess, the people who are affected by this air and water pollution are people who live in poverty and are often people of color. They don't have the resources to move away. Because of the air and water pollution, they often suffer from health and mental health issues at a much higher rate than others in our society do. Next slide, please. I promise I'm going to get to some good solutions soon. The pursuit of justice has been a fundamental tenet of Judaism since the beginning. We are commanded to treat people justly and fairly. We are commanded to pursue justice, even if justice seems remote. Sadly, the workers in this industry are treated as if they are expendable. They have the most dangerous jobs in the world and are often sick due to the filth that they inhale through their work. They frequently have body parts amputated due to the sharp equipment they work with and because of the speedy rate at which they are required to produce. They have no rights, no insurance, and no benefits. They are very often refugees, have no choice but to take these jobs. It was highly publicized when they were coming down with COVID in alarming numbers because they are treated as if they are expendable. This does not comply with our Jewish values of caring for the other or the worker. There are many other environmental and social justice issues that animal agriculture is responsible for, but I won't be able to list them all, and I want to turn to some solutions now. Next slide, please. Many people believe that meat from animals is required in order to be healthy and thrive. And I wanted to share some research that confirms that a plant-based diet can be extremely healthy. In fact, eating no meat lowers the risk of death from heart disease by 32%, according to a study from Oxford University. A George Washington University study found that a plant-based diet can reverse diabetes better than the American Diabetes Association diet. And the World Health Organization reviewed studies from around the world and concluded that red meat is known as a carcinogen. Research shows that people are getting twice as much protein than they need these days. Even some vegans are getting too much of it. There are many healthier protein sources like beans and nuts that don't have the link to cancer that animal protein does. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that the COVID pandemic has shown us how connected we all are to each other and to how we treat animals, because this pandemic is tied to the human consumption of an animal. And to show how serious this is, the National Institute of Health says that 75% of newly emerging infectious diseases are zoonotic in origin, which means they pass from animals to humans, and they are just as likely to come from the billions of animals right in our own backyards in the future. Now that you've learned about the destructiveness of this industry, what are some solutions available to us? Next slide, please. This does not have to be all or nothing, and even small changes can help. If you wanted to learn even more, there are mentoring programs that can help you learn to change your diet nowadays, along with a lot of plant-based alternatives at the grocery stores. We at Jewish Veg have a lot of delicious plant-based recipes on our website to help you see how easy and delicious it can be to remove the animal products. And we are also willing to meet one-on-one to answer any questions you have about how to switch out ingredients or how to find recipes for the foods you love. Organizations like Challenge 22 and PAN are two other examples of programs that offer free support and mentorship to help you if you feel like you want to move in this direction and start to decrease your reliance on animal-based foods. We want you to know that you don't have to figure this out on your own. Next slide, please. And it's not nearly as hard to reduce animal products as it once was. As you can see from the current slide, these Jewish foods were all made without any animal products. We want you to know that you can still enjoy many of the Jewish foods and flavors you've always loved. We just learned to make them using new recipes. Lox are made out of, and take yourself off mute and say if you know. Yep, that's right. They are made out of carrots. By the time you roast and then marinate in the same brine as you would do with salmon lox, they taste the same way. So much of food is the way we prepare it and flavor it. Next slide, please. In addition to individual change, which is really just the first step to collective change, there are ways to reduce your animal product intake as a Jewish communal organization, such as by adopting default veg or universal meals. Default Veg is asking Jewish and other faith-based organizations, along with university cafeterias and others, to flip the default. Normally, meat and dairy are the default, and if you want a plant-based meal, you often have to request it especially, and it is on a table in the corner. But by making plant-based meals the default, most people accept the default with no issues. However, if people are really demanding their usual meat-heavy meal, they can get it separately. This allows these institutions to drastically reduce the amount of animal products they are serving, but it also does not mandate vegan only, so fewer people have an issue with it. Another organization is promoting what they call universal meals because more people than ever have a specific diet due to health reasons, environmental or humane concerns, allergies, or cultural or religious traditions. And the Universal Meals program was designed to meet those needs. With universal meals, everyone can comfortably eat together. And what you're saying here is that all are welcome. And if you're really inspired to take what you've learned tonight back to the whole synagogue, our partners at the Jewish Initiative for Animals and their executive director, Rabbi Jonathan Bernhard, has joined us tonight for our presentation because we work so closely together. And they work with institutions to help you set up food policies that align with our Jewish values using strategies like Default Veg. All of these organizations mentioned provide tips, recipes, support, and free marketing materials to explain why you've moved in this direction so you don't have to do it alone. Next slide, please. In closing, eating less meat is much more easily accomplished than many other things we can do to help fight climate change and global warming. Most of us can start eating less meat immediately. Consuming less meat is one of the few tactics for reducing greenhouse gas emissions that can actually save money, whereas purchasing solar panels or fuel-efficient vehicles costs a lot of money, and most people can't easily do these things. The environmental destruction caused by animal agriculture far outweighs any benefits, especially for those who live in developed nations with access to a wide variety of foods. With so many plant-based options available, there is no need to farm animals on such a massive scale. Now more than ever before, our planet needs to shift away from the mass killing of chickens, pigs, and cows and create a plant-based food system in which people, animals, and the planet are treated with respect. Our days are filled with opportunities to repair the world, and I encourage you not to give up because your actions make a difference. If you're wondering if what you cook really makes a difference, I like this quote that I found from Amy Westerfeld, who is a climate activist. She says, just because an action is small does not mean that it has no consequences. Every individual action you take models behavior for someone else. Every purchase you make or don't make sends a signal to the beef, grocery, or restaurant industries. And individual action, in my opinion, is really just the first step towards collective action. As Jews who adhere to the values of Bal Tashit and fight for tzedek or justice and understand modern Eco-Kashrut, it should be a priority to reduce meat consumption so we can start to heal the world. I've shared our contact information here because we really want to be a resource for any of you. Please reach out if we can help you. And again, I want to thank Sybil, Anya, Rabbi Jenny, and Anna once again. We'd love to come back and continue to work with your synagogue and do other presentations as well. Happy Tu B'Shvat to all of you. And now we'd love to answer any questions that you have.
Happy to be Shvat.
God. What questions do you have for us?
Okay, sorry, that wasn't a question.
No problem.
I actually don't have a question, but I did want to say that my husband has a wonderful vegan blog where he has taken a lot of his mom's Jewish recipes and turned them into veganized and mostly gluten-free. And it's been so helpful
Wow.
for us because I did not grow up Jewish and I've never had those kinds of foods before until I married him, and I've never had these things as a meat eater or a dairy eater. So I don't know the difference, but apparently they're amazing. And it's been such a helpful resource for us.
That's incredible. What's it called, Anne?
I can put it in the chat, but it's vegindc.com because we used to live in DC.
I love it. I can't wait to check it out. That's so great. That's such a great point about the fact that there's just so many amazing recipes out there, and doing away with the meat products just is not the same as it used to be. You can still eat incredibly well now. Veg in DC. I can't wait to check it out. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
So I have a question. I'm not quite sure how to frame it. And we've been vegan or mostly vegan for quite a while now, but what we encounter is that, right, people are not very amenable necessarily when you tell them about, they ask you a lot of questions, but it's clear the mindset is not necessarily going towards it. And I must, admit, right, when Sybil originally made me read the book Eating Animals, I was, also not very eager and more opposed. So what kind of strategies, do you have to get people on board in a way that they actually feel they can do it, rather than trying to convince someone who really doesn't want to, which I think is kind of the main issue with all of this?
I think that's a great question. Where I've gotten to is that there are still a lot of people that are interested in this and want to learn more, and maybe have heard that the way that we're eating is not good for the planet, or not good for our health, or certainly not good for animals. And so I've started to just really focus on the people who are interested, because there's enough of them that they want to learn more, and it's hard to talk to the people that aren't interested at all. But I do really like the strategy of cooking delicious food for people. I worked with Sybil on the bar mitzvah, and it sounded like, the food was so delicious. And I think that's a great way to attract people. I mean, if you can have like your spread at your bar mitzvah sounded very similar to what the regular spreads are. It's just little tweaks. And so I think that was a great way to expose so many people to it. And what I find is that there's enough people that sort of come out of the woodwork. I don't know, maybe that's not a vegan expression to say come out of the woodwork, but come out because of wanting to learn more. And then also, there's so many new films and documentaries and books coming out, and those really help make our case. I mean, I have a lot of people coming up to me in the last month saying, oh, have you seen that study online, You Are What You Eat, I think is what it's called. It's about, or on Netflix, it's about twins, and they take twins, one on an omni diet and one on a vegan diet. And since they have the same, DNA, it's really interesting to see what the results are. So I think those are good tools as well. But I guess what I'm saying is I mostly at this point focus on people who want to hear what I'm saying, because it can be so frustrating to try to talk to people who just aren't interested. And there are enough people who do want to learn. And once they learn, do want to learn how to make shifts. Sarah, do you have anything else to add to that?
I mean, I definitely agree with everything you've said, Lisa. Especially on I think for me, the kind of mental framework that I have is like this information, these resources are here if people want them. And like the point isn't to like go out and shove it in people's faces. The point is like if this is something that feels right for you or feels interesting or meaningful for you, I want you to have that information. I want you to know that options available. If not, that's fine. If not, like there are other important ways to live in the world too that like also really matter. This is one of them and a very important one, but I don't ever feel like and I think it's important, as vegans to think about too, like this is not the only issue. It happens to intersect with a lot of other issues and therefore feel really central in ways that are true and important. And food is cultural, food is personal, food is spiritual, food is emotional. People should not feel shame about the way that they eat. So that's how I kind of approach it, that I want people to come from a place of curiosity and interest and joy and feelings, that they can celebrate with the food that they eat. So if this is for you, here's the information. And if it's not, that's okay.
And as Sarah's talking, and as I'm now having a minute to ruminate more on your question, I'm thinking, so we're pretty much emissaries of this, even without the fact that I happen to work in the Jewish vegan space. I mean, in our own personal life, we have people over almost every weekend to eat. We love to cook. We love to cook delicious food with no animal products in it. And then, people go, oh, wow, you can make banana bread, or you can make whatever the meal is we're making them. You can make pancakes. And so we really push ourselves to be emissaries around this, and it opens people's, and then they go, well, I really didn't know. How bad is it? And can I learn more? And so, hopefully everyone that eats at our house leaves having learned something. I'm not nudgy or pushy about it at all, but I'm trying to open up people's minds. But that is how my husband and I are. We're totally emissaries towards this, and we love to cook, and we're good cooks if we do say so ourselves, which I just did. But thanks for your question.
Yeah, that was very helpful. I do like that idea, through by feeding people. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Other questions?
Hi. So I'm vegetarian, I'm a lifelong vegetarian, but my husband is not. My family was growing up, so good for y'all with your family doing that. That's fun. How effective or like how good for the environment is it just to do one day a week or one meal a week? Is that like a good switch? I feel like I want to help him move towards that, but I don't want to be a pushy person.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the research says that nudges are really effective and end up like sort of rolling, having a continual effect on each other. So there is that whole Meatless Monday campaign, which claims a lot of success if people eat what they regularly eat for the week, but on that Monday eat no animal products. It does have the ability to really decrease the amount of animal products that are demanded for and therefore produced. Also, I think what happens is that sometimes like realize, wow, I feel a little bit better, or I feel a little bit less bogged down today, or I feel a little bit less bloated, or wow, that was really delicious having that plant-based roast beef sandwich, or whatever. We happen to have the Unreal Deli kosher plant-based roast beef in our house, so it made me think of it. And so then you expand your horizons, like, well, I really like that, so maybe I could have that Mondays for lunch and Fridays for lunch now. So there's a lot of research that says that decreasing, and also we just know that not everyone we talk to is going to go vegan after our conversation. So any steps you can take in that direction is a positive thing. And I think for the plant, if you don't want to be pushy because you're a vegetarian, obviously, and I don't know all of your reasons for it, but a lot of people don't want to push their ethics on other people. But if you say like, this is a good thing for the planet, and our family could try meatless Mondays, it just might be something that you do as a family that feels good, because we know that foods from animals are a lot more intensive on the planet and bad for the environment, as we just taught about.
I have a question. So my sister is, I guess, recently vegan, and she and her partner went to some fancy event that was all vegan, and it sounded like it was fabulous. But there was a kid there who saw cheese, and he was like, "Ooh, I'm gonna have some cheese." It was vegan cheese, and it was made from nuts, and he has a nut allergy. Yeah.
Gosh.
So I'm curious. I feel like there exactly. It's scary. So sorry, I have to let my dog out for a sec. Like I'm, how can you, and like at our synagogue, whenever we've gotten to where every food is labeled, this one has gluten and this one has nuts and this one, so even though it's vegan and that seems universal, it's not necessarily so. So anyway, I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that. And then my other thought that goes with that is I'm wondering if you move towards more healthy eating, if some of those allergies kind of decline, because maybe you're not putting so many allergens in your body. And it just a
An interesting question. Well, first of all, wow, that is just such a crazy experience, because yes, I'm sure the person just thought, oh, that's milk, right? Or that's somehow milk made into cheese. And of course, a lot of plant-based products, especially cheeses, are made from nuts. So I think that's just a good reminder that we just probably always need to label everything in this day and age. And then your second question, so at your synagogue, I would for sure label. And what we've even been able to do, by the way, going more on the labeling, is be like, we worked with Sybil and we're able to say, like, by having, chickpea tuna salad instead of tuna salad, like, this is how much water is being saved. Like, we're also able to give information, or I think that was more like egg salad, by switching from egg-based egg salad to tofu-based egg salad. You were able to give the details so people can see, wow, this shift really makes a difference on the environment. Yeah, I knew you had both. I wasn't sure what we gave you the numbers for, the amounts for, but so that's where I think signs are good, because allergens, and then also just really explaining by just making basically the same smushy, mushy, green, yellow stuff that you plop on a bagel, which is my description of egg salad or tofu egg salad. You are using so much less water and no animals involved. And then in terms of the allergies, I'm not a medical professional, but I have never heard yet met anyone who stopped drinking or participating in dairy milk who did not feel better, who did not say, I didn't realize I had more acne, or I've been more bloated my whole life, or more sneezy. I mean, most people are lactose intolerant, and including most Ashkenazi Jews, most non-white people. And so we're exporting this food that milk, it does a body good and it does almost no one good. So I don't know if that so much would release all the other allergies, the nut allergies, but there's a lot of benefit to getting rid of these foods that really exacerbate you and make you bloated, and most people are intolerant to. Sarah? I'm just off mute, so I'm taking them all.
No, that's great. Yes, so definitely what you said about dairy allergies, very, very prominent. Basically, almost every human has a lactose intolerance, like Lisa shared. And in fact, the Food Empowerment Project, which is another really great nonprofit organization, had a whole campaign about how dairy and colonialism dairy basically is an agent of colonialism. So I highly recommend checking them out. One thing I will say about the labeling about allergies, first, also not a medical professional. However, eating more plant-based foods and more foods with a lot of fiber in them can have anti-inflammatory properties, and that can be helpful for some people who experience allergies and inflammation. The other point that I wanted to just make very briefly is how we're talking about this whole concept of shifting food choices around, values and concepts of living with care in the earth. And also accessibility and the ability for everyone to participate in meals and be a part of our kind of social events, and a lot of Jewish social events are about food, is also a really important mind shift. So not just that, having the foods available, but having the thought that people need things labeled is really important. And so for, that situation where this poor child is trying to, eat something and no one's thought about how some people have nut allergies, having that kind of mind shift can be really, really powerful, not just in that moment, but in the entire way that we think about food. And Anna, I see your hand.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm so glad you're doing this. And the only thing is, so I try to be vegan as much as humanly possible, but I'm also celiac, and like a lot of the Jewish foods I mean, I don't eat meat, but a lot of the foods that I like those Unreal Deli slices, I can't eat because they're made with vital wheat gluten. Like, where would you point people who are also contending with gluten intolerances and the nut allergy, since a lot of the substitutes do contain vital wheat gluten? Or, I mean, I eat nuts, but other people don't. Like, what other traditional Jewish foods that are gluten-free and vegan could you point to?
Yeah, great question. And so in case any of you, I don't know how easy it is to get Unreal Deli, but this is a Jewish woman who basically she became vegan, but wanted to make the amazing deli she remembered growing up with her grandparents. And so she made vegan corned beef and turkey. And I think there's one other, since I've never really eaten meat in my life, I can't even remember what they all are, but it is often made of wheat gluten. So it's a great question. I don't know if this is going to be satisfying, but I would recommend doing some cooking, because what's been amazing is we spend our free time watching, YouTubers do cooking. So we learn, so we can host all the people over, and like, you can take tofu and make the same things that she's turned her cold cut slices into. If you finely cut the tofu and then you brine it and you put it in, some type of sauce, barbecue sauce or whatever the sauce is, and then you kind of smoke it in the stove. Like, it is amazing. I have watched YouTube vegan chefs make Philadelphia cheesesteaks, and this is just tofu based, not at all vital wheat gluten or seitan based. So I would definitely recommend, starting to learn how to make some of those things, because they are so delicious and not that hard. And there's just so many free chefs on YouTube that are willing to show you how to do it. And then in terms of brands and products, that's hard. I think that the whole push to get the vegan products made them forget for a little while about the fact that celiac, that folks can't eat wheat. And I think they're starting to move a little bit more in that direction, where they're going to be both vegan and gluten-free, but I think we're just catching up. And then nuts are an issue, because nuts are like the vegan holy grail, right? Like, that's how you make cheese and stuff like that. But if you do read a lot of those vegan packaged cheeses in the grocery store, there's a lot of them, and they're delicious brands that don't have any nuts in them as well. I think someone put in the chat, there's a vegan Boursin, which tastes just like that. It's that garlic herby cream cheese thing. And I guess it's nut and soy free. I didn't read it because I can eat nut and soy. As long as it has the word vegan, I'm happy. But that's amazing. We actually have some in the fridge, and I served it to my neighbors the other day, and everyone was nuts about it, if I can say that.
Also, with oat milk becoming a very big thing, that's been helping both for gluten-free, assuming, obviously that they're being careful about the oats, and for nut free. So my partner can't have nuts, so we do a lot of oat-based stuff.
Thank you. Oh, it looks like there are some vegan bagels and gluten-free that you can get near you. I don't think we don't have a Publix. Sabrina Clark, I don't know.
Hi, I'm not Sabrina, but I'm using her computer. My question, so I'm wondering, and I think one of you mentioned that you're a rabbinical student. I'm just trying to wonder how we make sense of the whole role of the whole animal sacrifice thing, and the role of animals in Jewish ritual objects. Should we be hoping for the restoration of temple sacrifice when Moshiach comes or whatever? You know, like that whole question.
Yep, I see Lisa muted herself. Yes. Okay. So in 5 minutes, I will attempt to sum up this very, very big question, which is, yeah, frequently asked question like times a zillion. Although I'm impressed that you worked in as many of the things that you did. Very, very briefly, and you can find more information on our website, jewishveg.org, and or reach out to us because I love talking about this stuff. But very, very briefly, so animal sacrifice was a very important biblical ritual in the time that Judaism was not even really a thing yet, and it was kind of just becoming a thing. And in that time period, what people did in that time period and in that geographic location, what people did in order to perform worship was animal sacrifice. And so Maimonides, who's this great, Jewish sage and thinker, writes about this time period and basically says, if you look at this from a historical perspective, you have to think about how these people who are used to performing animal sacrifices worship, they're not going to take this new, worship of this new God, this one God, they're not going to take it seriously if the only thing that is worship isn't being done. However, we're going to put restrictions on it. We're going to put limitations. We're going to say it can only happen in this space, in this time, in this way, just like the laws of Kashrut. And what does that do? That moves people along a path to thinking about worship differently and thinking about spirituality and spiritual engagement in a different way. And as Maimonides says, people move from this idea of animal sacrifice as worship to prayer and good deeds as worship. You will see that theme a lot in the book of prophets. Hosea and Isaiah and Amos talk a lot about how God, in the voice of God, how God does not want animal sacrifice. God wants intention and good deeds and prayer and inner holiness. And in terms of ritual objects, well, a lot of things over time in Jewish tradition become kind of solidified because that's what was available at the time. It's a question, and people have different ideas and responses to this question about whether those things are now worth reconsidering or whether we should stick with the tradition. What we say at Jewish Veg, if you're looking for tefillin or other ritual objects, if you have the opportunity to get them used, that's better for the environment and can be a way of engaging with those ritual objects in a way that might be good for people who want the tradition. And if you're looking for a mezuzah with a cloth, the parchment in it that is not made of animal materials, those do exist as well. I'm looking at the time because I also wanted to answer about the rebuilding of the temple. So just very quickly, you will see in, I hope I get the citation right. I think it's Midrash. I could be wrong. I'll have to double check the actual source for this and I can email you. But you will see that there is lots of rabbinic discussion about the third temple, obviously, the rebuilding of the third temple and the sacrifices that will resume at that time. And those sacrifices are the grain sacrifices. They're not the animal sacrifices, because what the animal sacrifices were for was for purification and sin. Well, in the time of the third temple, when Moshiach comes, there won't be any need for purification and cleansing of sin. We won't be sinning. Good for us. So we will only need to be doing the grain sacrifices, which are offerings of thanksgiving and peace. And that is my, in a nutshell, standing on one foot answer to that question.
Thank you.
You please feel free to email if you want to dialogue any further about that. There's a lot to say, but I did see that Erin pasted something into the chat, and that is really helpful as well. So I want to thank you, Sybil, thank you, Anya, and thank you for having us come. It's wonderful that this was the Tu B'Shvat celebration for your congregation. We love the opportunity to teach about this, and we do hope that we can work with your synagogue or put on another program. We love to teach cooking classes, and we can do talking about some of those films we saw or those books we saw, kind of doing a book club or a film club and discussing it further. But we really appreciated having this tonight for Tu B'Shvat, and we just want to thank you so much for inviting us.